The history of Alan Moore within comics is a long and complicated one, and people either are fans of Alan Moore or they're not. People either feel that Alan Moore was really screwed by the comic industry, or that he was a crazy guy who kind of got what he was coming to him. People tend to be fairly polarized on him. But there's one little fact that sometimes comes up in comic circles, and that's, did DC actually promise Alan Moore the rights for Watchmen and then lied about it? Hey everybody, this is Perch. Like I said, Alan Moore has a long and crazy legacy in comics. He's a very colorful character, both in appearance and statements and everything else. And it's funny. I'll do videos on Alan Moore, and I'll get people who kind of, oh yeah, that guy's nuts. Or I'll get people who fiercely defend, like, you can't go after him and his crazy snake god and other things. And for the record, I think Alan Moore's produced some pretty amazing comic books out there, definitely as his place in comic book history and pantheon. But like I've done on other videos, I think there's a lot of very colorful characters within comics. Alan Moore is certainly one of them. It's just one of the natures of if you're in comics, you have maybe a slightly higher percentage chance of doing something crazy and living the dream. So, but I think, you can't deny Alan Moore's certain impact on the industry. But one of these kind of myth busters, that's not what this channel is turning into, but one of these statements that comes out is that DC screwed Alan Moore by saying that he would have the rights, or he basically promised him the rights to Watchmen, which of course, given its massive success and movies and everything else that's come out, HBO shows, it would have meant Alan Moore was set up for life, that he would have been quite wealthy, and could have controlled the brand. I mean, you might argue if Alan Moore had had the rights to Watchmen, we probably would not have gotten the movie in the HBO series at all, because that was definitely not what Alan Moore wanted. Or who knows, when faced with the prospect of millions of dollars, tends to change people's minds, but who knows? Who am I to say? At any rate, but the claim goes that Alan Moore was promised the rights to Watchmen, and then DC, kind of in an act of betrayal, screwed him and then wouldn't give him the rights back, and that this was, a betrayal on the part of creators. There's other creators who definitely, I think, subscribe to that and believe that Alan Moore was really unfairly treated. So, but the reality is this. This all kind of goes into kind of your view of how things should work. So initially, Alan Moore, David Gibbons, who are doing Watchmen, were going to use the Charlton characters. And these characters, DC had just acquired them. They were anxious. I think Moore was anxious to do something with them and kind of bring them back into the public spotlight. Had crafted this story that was going to take a new kind of dark view. So it was kind of a new canvas for him to play with. But DC decided that they're going to use the characters in another place, and that Moore and Gibbons had to create their own. So they did, and they created their own characters that definitely had, you could see the Charlton characters in the Watchmen characters. There's a lot of very close similarities, and it was somewhat of a thin copy, if you will. Definitely had their own personalities, but you could definitely see the original ones as well. So the hero, Watchmen gets created, and these heroes, these villains, these characters were made, and Moore and Gibbons assign a contract that basically stated that since they created these characters, the rights to them would return to the authors if DC stopped printing comics about the characters. And at the time, this was, it was believed at least that, if the comic did incredibly well, then, certainly it would continue. But generally speaking, they didn't believe they were making the next Superman or the next Batman. So they believed that, the Watchmen would come out, it'd be a finite series, it would be done. And then, in a couple of years' time, the rights would return to the creators. But what happened was that the trade paperback boom, the collections boom, happened, and Watchmen being a very popular title, got reprinted and got created, got put into collections, and has been put in collections every year since its inception, and has been one of the top selling. In fact, maybe, I mean, it's not, but I think you can make an argument that Watchmen was the top selling, or is the top selling graphic novel or collection, not graphic novel, a trade paperback collection. And certainly with the movies and everything else, that continues. You can't see a time in the next, I don't know, several decades that this would occur. So The Watchmen became a huge hit. Alan Moore, I think, didn't expect it to become a huge hit. Moore will defend his work, saying he always believed this was, he was creating something new and special and unique. But nobody really expected it to be as popular as it was, and nobody expected it to kind of birth the trade paperback boom. And so because of that, DC published trade paperbacks. So in fact, they kept the characters and the comics in print. So thus, the rights never returned to Alan Moore or Dave Gibbons. What I just described, if you're a more modern comic reader, and when I say more modern, I mean in the last 20, 30 years, it's hard to imagine a world without trade paperbacks and without collections. And it's also hard to imagine a world where you're not sure if Watchmen would be successful or not. So the challenge here is that most people hear this story and they're like, well, that was a stupid agreement that Moore and Gibbons signed, and that clause was dumb because it was never going to come to pass. I mean, even unpopular comics are getting trade paperbacks right now. I mean, I think, I don't know, are they doing trade paperback of, Future Foundation? I'm not sure. But anyway, I mean, you've got kind of fourth and fifth volumes of Squirrel Girl coming out, and long after that trade paperback is not selling at the kind of rate that a lot of the initial ones were. So, this all goes to kind of, again, your point of view. Did DC screw Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons in this particular instance? And there's lots of other little controversies out there. I would say probably not. I also don't, there's some fans who will say, well, no, DC deliberately kept this comic in print. Well, that's true, they did, but I think they kept this comic in print for money, not, because they wanted to grind some kind of axe with Alan Moore. They kept this comic in print, because it was profitable for them to do so. And so I think that's, you can certainly say that DC did a lot of shady things over the years. I mean, that's your opinion, and whatever you choose to believe is fine. But I think in this case, it's hard to point to DC kind of deliberately keeping the comic in print because this comic was making a lot of cash. I don't believe there's a strategy by DC to lose money or deliberately keep the rights through nefarious means by continuing to print graphic novels that were selling. That's the operative thing of this thing, that we're selling. And I know I'll get some comments in this thing and some downvotes and some negative people saying, no, DC was wrong to these creators. He might have been. They might have been. They definitely, there's a lot of history there. But I will, deflate the myth that the DC deliberately took steps to, keep Watchmen in print just to hold Alan Moore down. They kept Watchmen in print because it was profitable. I think that's pretty much all there is to it. Some people use a counter argument. Well, yeah, but it's only profitable because they kept it in print. If they didn't keep it in print, it wouldn't have been profitable. And then it's like, okay, that's some, I can't even wrap my head around that logic at the moment. If something's going to make money, it's going to keep being printed. That's pretty much all there is to it. What do you think? Did DC screw Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, or was this just a case of something was more popular than people thought, and they kept publishing and publishing and publishing it, and this is the end result? Where do you fall in it? Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Like, subscribe, introduce to a friend. Would love that. And follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. Ask me to dig into anything you have questions about. I'm happy to do so. Most importantly, though, thanks for listening.